Welcome to Fertility Village. This is your weekly live talk show where community and support come together. With rotating hosts, expert guests, and meaningful conversations, we're here to guide you through the highs and the lows of infertility. Whether you're searching for answers, seeking advice, or just looking for a special place to belong, Fertility Village is your space to connect, learn, and grow. Because it really does take a village, and we are here for you every step of the way. Thanks for joining. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back, Fertility Village Live. We are finally live in all of the places that we wanted to be tonight. We're so excited for today's episode. We have a very, very special guest joining us. As always, lots of special guests here on the live. It's going to be a really insightful and important conversation. So, we're excited to welcome Dr. Arielle.
Thank you for having me.
So we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Arielle, a clinical psychologist licensed in both Ontario and Quebec, and she specializes in sex and couples therapy and has a wealth of experience working with individuals and couples who are navigating infertility, perinatal mental health, and relationship dynamics. Dr. Arielle, thank you so much for being here tonight with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we dive into the discussion tonight about all things Valentine's Day, love, sex, relationships. So excited about this conversation. Ashley and I were talking about it before. We're going to learn a few things tonight. Can't wait. But before we dive in, let's hear from Dr. Arielle. I want to hear a little bit about your background, what drew you to specialize in this area of mental health and relationships, and what made you want to focus your practice on specifically on these things.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So, ever since my undergraduate degree, I've always wanted to be a sex and couples therapist. That was always what I dreamed of. And the reason being is that, so many people suffer in silence in these areas in terms of, having sexual dysfunctions or sexual difficulties, having difficulties with their partners, how to navigate the couple relationship. It's something that I think we all struggle with at certain times in our life, and we just don't talk about it. Right? There's so many taboos in our society, and there's so many things stopping us. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of myths. And so, to me, that was my life mission that I wanted to help people as much as I can. And, I was always just interested in romantic relationships and what makes people tick, right? And then in terms of the fertility space and in terms of the postpartum space, it was my own experiences that drove me here, right? In terms of my own struggle with fertility, my own struggle with postpartum. And was looking around in terms of, who else is in this space providing help. And unfortunately, there really aren't many of us here, right? So at that point, that was my focus. My new focus was to say, yes, sex and couples, and I love that. But also, how do couples navigate fertility, right? How do couples navigate the postpartum period or any kind of parenting, right? The entire road to parenthood is fraught with stress, with all kinds of things that might happen. And then we feel it in our relationships, right? There's a huge impact on the couple. So to me, that was where I'm needed in terms of there's not many of us here. And that's why I want to do this work.
Yeah, that's so true. And like a good point you mentioned is that you've experienced or some of the struggles. So it's nice. Like I know, like in the past, have friends and you've seen therapists, and they haven't been through similar situations. So it's really hard because you feel like you're explaining to them the situation, and then having to like get them to support you after they figured out how to help you, kind of. So it's kind of nice that you've had that experience for sure.
Yeah, 100%. If you had asked me before, which people did, clients did, right? They asked me, "Do you have kids and do you understand?" And before I was like, "Well, doctors treat pneumonia without ever having had pneumonia." Right? So of course I can treat in terms of, yes, I can study about it and I can understand it and I can hear about it and right all the perplexities. And then I had my own kids, right? And I went through my own journey with fertility and I went through my own journey with postpartum and birth trauma and everything. And I came out of it going, you don't really understand, and unfortunately, until you've gone through it. And it's not that people who haven't gone through it can't help. Yes, any support is really good support, right? But at the same time, it gives us a different perspective, right? Once we've gone through it ourselves, as long as we make sure that we are taking the proper, training and precautions and everything else that goes with it, we want to make sure that we are helping people in the right way, right?
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if you are tuning in or listening to this afterwards and you want to hear Dr. Arielle's whole fertility story and another interview that we at Oasis FSN did with Dr. Arielle, she was actually on the Oasis Fertility podcast. Season 2, you'll see Arielle's story and you can hear her whole fertility story. And there are some awesome nuggets in there too of information about our relationship. So definitely that's the Oasis Fertility podcast, and you'll be able to catch this episode over there. Shameless plug for the podcast, everybody. You'll be able to catch this episode over there in a couple of days, anywhere you get your podcast, but her full episode is available on the Oasis Fertility podcast, again, anywhere you get your podcasting info.
All right. Ready to dive in, girls?
Yeah,
All right.
let's do it.
All right. So your first question, Dr. Arielle, is infertility can feel incredibly isolating, and so many individuals and couples struggle in silence, as you mentioned. So in your work, what are some of the most common emotional challenges you see people facing during fertility journeys?
Yeah. So, like you said, a lot of people do this in silence, as in a lot of people are not talking to their loved ones about the fact that they're going through fertility issues, that they're going to see a clinic, right? There's so much shame, unfortunately, around all of this right now, even still, even in 2025,
Mhm.
right? Which is, to me, mind blowing, to be honest, in terms of why can't we talk about this openly at this
Mhm.
point? So because people aren't talking to their networks, they're essentially alone, right?
Mhm.
As in they might have one or two people there, but for the most part, they're not talking about this. And then the other piece of it, right, is that a lot of couples who come see me, they're not talking to each other about the experience either, right? Because they're
Mhm.
living it and they're either making assumptions that they're on the same page, but they might not be, right? There's so much going on in terms of it's really an emotional roller coaster, really, right?
Yeah.
There's ups, there's downs,
Yeah.
there's everything in between, right? And each partner might experience that in a whole different way, right?
Yeah.
So, on top of feeling alone because you don't really have anybody to talk to, you're also saying, well, my partner is not on the same page as me, right? So, I feel even more alone because they're the person I would seek for support. And
Mhm.
maybe they're not capable of giving that support because they themselves are going through this too,
For
right?
sure.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
in terms of my work with couples, is first of all, aligning them, right? In terms of getting them each to support each other, right? So that they're hearing each other, that they have empathy and understanding for what each of them in this relationship is going through, so that at least they can come together and connect, right? And then, of course, I'm there to support them as well,
For sure.
right? So that's definitely just one of the things that is
Yeah.
occurring,
And I
right?
can definitely see it being challenging. And, especially if it's one couple feels like maybe the infertility is on their end of things and maybe feels like more
Hmm.
responsibility and pressure. So I can totally see what you're saying there. Yeah. Like getting them to understand like it's no one's fault and how, like, even if it's one person's body that's not able to do what needs to be done, like the couple still need to come and connect on the same level. Yeah.
100%. And that's what I mean in terms of, first of all, unfortunately, there's still so much shame,
Yeah.
right? In terms of
Mhm.
shame of, is this my fault? Is my body not capable? Right? Is this not natural? Right? Like there's so
Right.
many things that might be going on. Everyone, right, has a very different experience. So I don't want to generalize too much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all to say that, you might be feeling one way, your partner might be feeling a different way, and it's really hard to communicate about it, right?
Mhm.
Specifically because it's so fraught with tension, right?
Yeah. That was like right into the next question. So it does create a lot of tension. So how do you help partners stay connected and maintain a strong sense of support for one another while they're going through this like super frustrating time?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is talking about it, right? In terms of talking about your experience, talking about what you're going through, and then also, separating yourself from it sometimes too, right? To be able to take a step back, to be able to take a break in between cycles, for example.
Mhm.
That's often really good for state of mind. Able to take a vacation sometimes, right? Able to put some fun in it too, right? And to create intimacy in different ways, right? All while trying to communicate about everything going on. And it's hard, right? In terms of there's a
Mhm.
lot of moving pieces. Um, and as I said, everyone has a different experience. But that's why I love it when couples are able to come into therapy so that they're able to talk about it here in this space.
For sure. I've seen it a lot of times too, where it's either it's just the woman going to therapy or just like the
Mhm.
male or one partner. And I do agree that I think that to feel more comfortable in yourself, I think you, like you said, you do need couples to come in together. And it kind of goes into our next question: is what role does grief play in the fertility journey, and how can people navigate cycles of hope and disappointment? And you kind of touched on that, taking breaks. I don't know if you have any other suggestions for us.
Yeah. And, I think it's just to say also that everyone experiences it in a very different way,
Mhm.
right? For
Yeah.
some people, they experience anger, right?
Mhm.
So, in terms of dealing with the anger, you know, different ways of managing the anger piece is really important, right? So,
Yeah.
that might be, going to the gym or talking it through, or right, like, we spoke on our other podcast about the role of religion or spirituality. Well, it
Mhm.
sometimes it lends itself to this angle as well, in terms of really trying to work through your grief, right? Which could come out in anger, it could come out in sadness, right? It could come out in a depression, it can come out in anxiety, in terms of saying, okay, well, how do I do this again? But how do I do it better the next time? Which,
Right.
again, it's not your fault and it's nothing that you did wrong, right? So it's very hard for a lot of couples. And to remember again that every single partner in the couple might take it differently, right? For some people, it's a huge setback. For other people, they don't take it as harshly, right? And
Mhm.
they're ready to move forward quicker than their partner might be. So, it's hard to say in terms of, I don't want to generalize too much,
Yeah, that's
but
fair.
in terms of, you know, handling it differently, and to remember that we're only human, right? And to handle it in the best capability that we can, with self-compassion, right? To be compassionate for ourselves, be compassionate for our partner, and understand that they're going through something huge too, even if it doesn't look like it, right? Even if you're
Mhm.
saying, well, it's my body and it's not their body, or they don't look like it's affecting them, right? Because
Mhm.
some people have it inside and they're not, putting it out towards the world. And so we forget, right? We forget how hard it's affected them, right? And some people might not be as hardly affected, right? And so everyone has a different way to cope, right? And so just to remember to have compassion for yourself, compassion for your partner, and understanding and empathy as much as you can, even when it's really, really hard.
For sure.
Yeah, and the grief journey is so not linear, especially with
No.
infertility. I find that you go, through these stages sometimes multiple times in 1 month. It's not a stage, it's a journey, and you're up and down, and then you get through one, part of your fertility journey where you've now had a loss, and then there's another whole wave of grief in a different way, and then trying to navigate that with your partner, it can be so difficult. I think that the grief is so complicated with infertility, and we don't talk enough about it and how to deal with it, because
Mhm.
you just feel all of these things constantly and don't know how to navigate this. So I'm so glad we're having this conversation. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think that yeah, this is so exciting. So I'm going to ask another question. um, we're going to move on to talk a little bit more about communication and intimacy challenges. So, one of the toughest aspects, I think, of infertility treatments is how it can affect communication and intimacy. So, when fertility treatments can sometimes feel clinical or even mechanical, how can couples maintain the emotional and physical closeness that they once had?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it affects your intimacy for sure, right?
Mhm.
And the way I like to distinguish it is calling it baby making versus love making, right? And also to remember that this is, as you mentioned, it's a journey, but it's also a small part of your journey, right? In terms of, for a lot of couples, they might be in this for, yes, up to a few years, but in the lifespan of things, if we can hold on, right? I know it feels really, really hard and exhausting in the moment, right? But if we think about it in terms of the long term, we're going to get out of it. We will, right? So, first of all, to hold on hope in terms of, yes, it's hard right now and you're in the trenches, right? I tell that to my couples all the time of, you're in survival mode, right? You're in the trenches, you're in it, and it's really hard, but you will get out of it, right? There will be a different tomorrow, right? So, first of all, to hold on to that hope. That's the most important secret sauce, I think, right? But then going back to baby making versus love making, right? There's different pieces of intimacy, right? There's emotional intimacy, like you spoke about, in terms of communication, right? In terms of empathy, in terms of understanding and caring for our partner and showing our partner that we care in different ways. I'm sure you've heard about the love languages. I know that that's like
Yes.
super popular, right? So everyone has a different love language. Right. For those of you who aren't aware, there's different love languages in terms of, I'm someone who is a gift giver and I love going to choose gifts for the people that I love, right? Um, and other people, love acts of service or acts of kindness, right? Or just spending time together, like quality time, right? There's a few different love languages. And so, part of emotional intimacy is learning how to decode each other's love languages, right? Because what might be my love language might not be my husband's love language, right? And we have to understand each other's love languages. If you think about, I love to explain it like this, of like basketball nets and you're shooting hoops, right? I have to shoot a basketball into your net and you have to shoot it into my net, right?
For
So
sure.
for that to be shooting it in the appropriate net, we have to know what those nets actually are, right? So, that's part of the work that I do with couples a lot of the time is decoding what is your love language and what is your partner's love language so that we can start to fit those better, right? And
Yeah.
understand those needs as well as we can, right?
Yeah,
And it's
I love
super
the love
important.
language conversation. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and
Go
that's
ahead.
super important, within the entire journey of your relationship for sure. But I
Yeah.
think it's especially helpful when sex is so hard, right? Because it's fraught with so much tension, as we've said, right? That the emotional bond that you have between the two of you is even more important. And as we've said, those things are already triggered already, right?
Yeah.
So if we can strengthen your bond by using the love languages, then you're all the better for it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of intimacy, in terms of sexual intimacy, right? Like there's baby making, which some people are on timed intercourse, some people, have a regimen with hormones, your desire might be less than it usually is, right? So we talk about what's good enough sex, right? And just as it sounds, as in what would be good enough right now in the moment so that you can have some intimacy with your partner, whatever that might look like, right? That might be penetration. Usually it's not, right? There's
Hmm.
so many other things that we can do that are sexually intimate, right? And I say that because you're not going to be doing it with anybody who's not your partner, right?
Yeah.
So those are the things that we can feed on during this time, right? That don't qualify as baby making. We're putting that away sometimes, right? To at least have a little bit of intimacy too. And then there's the physical intimacy, touch is so important. Hugging, cuddling, holding hands, like those little tiny things that often get put by the wayside, right? So if we can increase those and increase, I like to say it as like an injection of fun, right? I know that there's other injections going on during this time, but if you can think about it as, okay, we're going to put in some fun, especially for Valentine's Day coming up.
Yeah, that's so
Um,
good. I love that.
but but yeah, like to start doing it that way as much as you can, even when it's a roller coaster of that it's hard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. The love language conversation is so good. I also read a book by the author of that book. He co-authored another book, and it's The Languages of Apology. And
Oh,
that
interesting.
blew my
Mm.
mind because I was like, okay, we need that too. We
Thank
need
you.
the
I'm gonna go look it up. I haven't
yes,
seen that one.
we need to know how, because everybody, apparently there's 5 languages of apology and everybody apologizes in a different way, and that's when you're like not speaking the same apology language, things get really hectic. It's
Hmm.
fascinating concept, but the love languages is so good. I highly encourage everybody to go pick up that book or grab it on Audible. We can link it in the show notes if you go over to the podcast or the YouTube live after this. Yeah, absolutely. Great
Yeah, and by the
recommendation.
way, there's also an online quiz you can take for your love languages.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
Yeah.
all
Yes, I know
right.
for sure I am time. And so for me, it was like a lot of, yeah, big breaks, vacations, making sure that like the time was like at the forefront of like, what we did. Probably why I had a decade-long fertility journey, but you know what? It is what it is.
We'll see if
Yeah,
we can
but
get that quiz and post it in the links for everyone as well.
hmm yeah, but
Yeah.
taking vacations is honestly, it's a really good idea, right? In terms of taking breaks when you
Mhm.
feel like your body has gone through too many cycles at one time, or just that your relationship has gone through too many cycles at one time, right?
For
Taking
sure.
a break is really important.
Yeah. Do you have any specific exercises or strategies that you recommend when couples do feel disconnected? So I know you said like talking and trying to figure out love language, but do you recommend any strategies or
Yeah,
anything
just
specific?
again, the injection of fun, right? Go back to basics. Try to do the things that you fell in love with your partner doing, right? Whether it was going bowling on your first date or going to play laser tag or something that you love, right? Maybe it's wine tasting. I know
Mhm.
that that can be fraught with tension, but maybe it's a non-alcoholic wine tasting, right? But something that reminds you of why you fell in love in the first place, right? In terms of doing those on a regular basis as much as you can is so helpful, right?
Yeah,
And
that's good
again,
advice.
the Valentine's Day ideas, right?
Yeah.
Of, have a date night, have a
Totally.
dress up night, have a games trivia night, right?
Yeah.
But do something with your couple in terms of, again, just try to reconnect as much as you can to reach each other, even when it's
Hmm.
really dark.
Yeah, I think that's important because as like you go through your fertility journey, I know for some people, you kind of disconnect and kind of like shut people away, even maybe friends or family. You're not going to as many
Mhm.
events and whatnot. So if you can do something fun with your partner, then that's can maybe help and lead to more fun down the road.
Well, and you touch on
Totally.
an important point, right, in terms of the support group. And I think a support group is so important, right? I understand that for a lot of people, it's hard to talk about this. And maybe that's not what you need, right? Maybe it's actually that you need a support group who's not going to talk about it, who's going to distract you, who's going to take you out for dinner, who's going to go see the latest movie. Whatever it is, having a support group there is really important if you can manage it.
I think joining a book club is a good idea. That's like not
Yeah.
fertility related at
Yeah.
all.
A
Totally.
100%. It is so
Romanticy book club
crucial.
sounds like a great idea.
Yeah,
I just want to
it's so
say
crucial to put down the fertility sometimes, right? I get
totally
how important it is, and when we're in
distract.
the crux of it, how it's all consuming,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
But to try to have a side project too, something that's, fun and engaging. Maybe it's planning the vacation, or maybe it's, doing a wardrobe change, whatever it is, or book club. right? But having something on the side as a project that maybe even includes your partner in terms of it's a couple project that is unrelated to fertility or building a family, I think is also really important.
Yeah, that's great. Very good. I want to say before we're going to move into the next segment in a second, but for those of you watching, please feel free to leave us comments, ask questions. We can take live questions on air. We've got all of the comments streaming here that we can see. So please feel safe to comment, ask Dr. Arielle a question. Or if you have, if you want to be part of the conversation, feel free to just make a comment about what we're chatting about or weigh in. What's your love language if you know it? Anything like that. Give us lots of love so so that we can promote this episode. It's going so great. Okay, next question. We're going to move into navigating treatment stress and mental health. So we all know that fertility treatments are so demanding and stress takes a huge toll on our mental health. So what are some ways that people can prioritize and care for their mental health while navigating this process? We all know you're going to say therapy, and I like, yes, absolutely, 1,000% therapy, support groups, but especially when the emotional weight feels overwhelming, could you give us some support on what are some things that people can do to prioritize their mental health?
Yeah, try to take breaks as much as possible, right? In terms of distraction is something that's good. Like I mentioned, a project, right? So a project that is consuming, whether it's at work, right? Maybe, some people throw themselves into their work during this time. And I encourage that as long as it's not too stressful, right? But it's a good, distraction that's actually productive, right? Because you want to be good at your job and what you do. And for a lot of people, there's two loves in their life, right? There's their partnership family and there's also their work, right? So throwing yourself into work is usually a good idea. And then doing the things that are going to help your mental health regardless, right? So taking care of your body, right? Eating, especially, that's something that's super crucial. And, I think that everyone can benefit from healthy eating in terms of making sure that your body's getting the nutrients that they need. You can't function without them, right? So I'm not a dietitian, so I don't want to go too far into that. But a plug-in that, yeah, dietitians are really, really helpful during the fertility treatments and during this time of your life in terms of just to manage what you're eating because it does go hand in hand with your mental health, right? The same with physical exercise, right? So you do want to be careful with exercise in terms of just making sure that your doctor's on the same page as you as to what's safe and what's not safe. But if you get the go ahead and the green light, like taking a walk should usually be safe, right? Going outside and getting some fresh air, never minding this snowstorm that we have tonight.
Yes.
But get your dog if you have a dog, or get one of your friends if you have someone who'll go on walks with you or your partner, and go on walks, right? Even that sounds so simple, but it can be so beneficial. Get, some AirPods and get your podcasts and do something that you can get outside and get moving. Pilates is also amazing, right? In terms of that's something that I do all the time, and I find that it helps so much, both with your body, but also with your mind space, right? In terms of being mindful of where you are. It's kind of like yoga is the same thing. Just again, just checking in with your doctor to make sure that it's safe, right? Those are all really good tools. Journaling, a lot of people like to journal and just get their thoughts on paper, right? That's something that's also super helpful in terms of writing down your experience, writing down your emotions, right? The roller coaster, and maybe one day you're going to want to look back and say, oh yeah, like I forgot about that part, I forgot about the sweet part, I also forgot how hard it was, right?
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah. So we'll move into the next question here. So the uncertainty of infertility, especially when the outcome is unknown, can leave people feeling lost. So how do you help your clients cope with this uncertainty, and what are some ways they can manage expectations during such an unpredictable journey?
Yeah, it's hard, I'm not going to lie, it's
Yeah.
hard. Right? I remember how hard it was. I really and truly do. Like I said before, I think the secret sauce is hope,
Mhm.
right? In terms
Yeah.
of holding on to hope is something that's super important. And whatever that looks like for you, right? That's a very individualistic, intangible thing, right? For some people, that means fantasizing about what they want from their family, right? For other people, it might mean a spiritual connection, right? Which is also a great place for support too, right? In terms of whether it's your spiritual leader who's giving you support, which a lot of them are more open and on top of this than you might think, right? Or whether it's just having a place to go and pray every week, and therefore there's an activity to do, and a place for you to be welcome to go. That's also awesome, right? The same with a support group, right? So holding on to hope and whatever that looks like. Um, for one of my clients, it was painting, right? And she loves to paint. And we were like, okay, like, can we do an assignment as to what does hope look like on a canvas, right? In painting. And that was something that she loved and that she held on to. And, I think that was an inspiration for her as well, right? So for everybody, it looks very different. But I think the secret sauce is really hope.
Yeah. I know for so many folks on this journey, especially the ones who are really like down the road a long ways, treatment after treatment, sometimes loss of a cycle, loss of an embryo, loss of a pregnancy, loss of a baby. What would you advise people can do to get that hope back? Because it is such a roller coaster, and it hurts so much. And when the defeat is there, and you're just so defeated and feeling like, I don't know how to hope anymore. I don't know how to progress on this journey. What would you advise people in that space? Because it is so hard to find hope again.
Yeah, I get it. I think it goes back to our conversation on grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of giving yourself the space to mourn. That's so important, right? To be able to have compassion for yourself, right? Self-compassion is equally important. And to understand what's happening around you, right? And to
Mm-hmm.
be able to take a step back,
Yeah.
right? To be
Wait,
able to
what? So
say,
we're not supposed to go back to back to back to back to back to back to back? No.
no, right? Taking that
Yeah.
time to come back to yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
It's so
clients
true.
tell me that they don't feel like themselves anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I get that.
And I think that's really important to come back to basics and to say, hold on, right? Who am I? And it's a really tough question to ask. It really is, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happens sometimes when we put our hobbies on hold or our friendships on hold or our partnership on hold, right? Or our work on hold. And sometimes part of that grieving process is going, okay, can I take a step back and can I go back to the things that I love,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
become me again,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then
Yes.
come back and say, okay, right? Sometimes there's hard decisions to make, right? And that doesn't mean we're not hoping anymore. It just sometimes means we have to recalibrate, right? And see what we really want because it might have changed by that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the grief too. It might change. You might have a different picture in your mind at this point. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. And
Yes.
saying that that's okay, giving yourself permission to change and to recalibrate and to come back to who you are, right?
Yeah.
And to who your partner is. Again, finding your partner in all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a plug for therapy, but in terms of really just
It's okay.
just to
It can
come
be.
back, right? But to
Yeah.
come back to each other, right? Because
Yeah.
often it gets lost and the couple gets lost. And I think that's when people are really at their most unhappy place is when there's so much experience of loss all around.
For
Yeah.
sure. And I think that like therapy can just give you that reminder to do that, right? Because I think you
Mhm.
get so lost in the journey that you're like, I don't know how to get out of it. I think that's where like but I do really like your point about like, doing something that you really love and getting back to like who you were before that, I think is like a really good point to bring up. So I really like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
to
I think
reconnect with
just
yourself, right? And to
yeah,
Yeah.
reconnect with your partner.
yeah,
And for me to be there as your cheerleader, right? To be
yeah,
there to be your
totally.
guide.
I think like knowing who you are though, and knowing what those things are, those like those, weights that hold you down, that hold you together. Like it's like I think like looking back, I'm just like as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, I know I didn't do the things.
I know.
But I'm like I don't know if I could have in the moment actually identified these are the things that, because fertility journey is also all consuming, and so I became fertility journey, and so like that was my identity during that time, and it was so hard to like even go back to like what who am I right now, and what it like, because it's just so all encompassing. So that is, I'm like digging that advice so much because I wish I had it back then. And I think too, like connecting with the partner and the things that make you, like the things that make you a partnership, go back to those things. That is just like, whoa, amazing. She's on fire, guys.
Hmm.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation.
Yeah, going back to
Yeah.
basics is so important. And you're
Hmm.
right, sometimes in the moment you can't see it. You can't,
No.
right? Because you're so stuck in the thick of things. And
Yeah.
again, this is not a plug for therapy, but that's what a therapist is for, right? To
Yeah.
guide
Yeah.
you and to help you out of the darkness and to say, look, like maybe this is the key thing that you forgot was going on,
Yeah.
right? Or
But
that's
it's like that
the key
analogy
part of
where,
your identity,
yeah,
right?
it's like that analogy where you like, if you want to boil a frog, you don't just throw them into the boiling water. Like if somebody had thrown me into my fertility journey at year 8, I would have been like, ouch, like, okay, I know
Hmm.
I'm not me, but like I just heated up so slowly over that whole decade that like I didn't, like I couldn't, it was such a gradual change and shift of like losing myself through that. Oh my gosh, now I'm having therapy with Dr. live on.
Yeah. I think too, like,
Yeah.
'cause when you're so into the fertility world, and I mean, Erin, you might even be able to speak to this too, Dr. L, is it's so consuming that like it consumes like every part of your life while you're driving, you're coming home, and I feel like you're Googling and you're on Facebook groups and you're trying to like what went wrong this time and what can I do next time, and you're doing like, so just that like reminder from someone to be like, maybe let's stop that for like, let's not go on Facebook for like today, or like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, not do
Hmm.
it all of the time, or like decrease it, or just that somebody who can be an outside person to like support the your mental health through it, I think is like a big thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. 100%. But at the same time, you have to be open to it,
Oh, for
right?
sure.
And it's hard.
Mhm. And I
Yeah.
do think one of the big things is finding the right person to work with. I think that can always be a thing
Hmm.
because you're not always going to jive with every single therapist, or I'm sure you maybe not clients for you. And so I think that's something too. But
1,000%. And that's why I always recommend to shop around, right? Because the secret sauce to therapy is the therapist, is your relationship with the therapist. It's
yeah,
not just the therapist. It's, do you click with the therapist? Do they understand you, right?
Yeah.
Do they empathize with you? Do they get what you're saying, right?
yeah,
Because I need to understand you in order to do therapy with you,
for sure.
right? And that's the secret sauce.
Well, I think Erin and I will be signing up next week. I'm just kidding.
Thousand percent. Oh, what a great segue too into our next segment about support systems and seeking help. Ashley, why don't you ask the next question?
All right. So therapy can be such a powerful tool, as we're talking about here. But sometimes people hesitate to seek professional help because they're unsure if it's the right time. So, what are some signs that someone might need to reach out for therapy or emotional support during their infertility journey, or any journey, really?
Yeah, and it's a good question. We need to normalize it. We need to normalize therapy, right? In terms of don't wait until it's too late, right? I like to think of it in terms of, this is what I tell my couples all the time, right? You're going to take your car for an oil change. You do it regularly. You change your tires regularly. You're regularly checking in on your car, what, every 6 months on its entire lifetime, even if you just bought the car and it's brand new and it's working beautifully, you're always going to check in on it, right? And it should be the same with our relationships because relationships require work. They do, right? It's not going to just magically happen. And so, checking in with a therapist is not a sign of weakness. It's not saying that there's something wrong. It's quite the opposite, actually. I like to think of it as you're putting in the work. You're putting in the work. You're dedicating time to your relationship, and you're saying how special it is and how committed you are. So, first of all, there's that. Now, in terms of, signs that you might need help, you know, for sure, if you're in distress, then definitely reach out for help, right? You know, I I said don't wait until it's too late, but it is never too late. Like go to therapy when you need therapy, right? And if you're in distress, please go seek help and seek emergency care, right? If at any time that you're feeling like you might hurt yourself or like you might, do something worse, please go to the emergency department, right? We need to take mental health really seriously, the same way as we take it seriously when we're sick, right? Um, but yeah, checking in with a support system is really important and trying to build one. And, I know Oasis has an amazing support group, and I think it's amazing work that you guys are doing, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Um, yeah, because
Yeah, we
I
have
know that,
19 support groups currently.
yeah,
So if you're out there and
yeah.
you're looking for support, we have in-person locations all over Ontario currently. There's shameless plug for Oasis, but we also have virtual groups for all kinds of different categories. And we are working on having a couples group. So it would be so great to
Oh,
have a space
exciting.
for,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
for couples to connect and go together to a support group and see other couples that are struggling. So that is on our radar. It's something that's going to be happening this year. We're just looking for the right people to lead that group. So if you're out there and you're, contemplating getting involved with our organization, we would love to hear from you. Okay, back to the
Yeah,
interview.
that's amazing, right? Support groups are amazing.
Yeah.
Um, we need better funding from the government, to be very honest, in terms of more funded programs so that everyone can gain equal access to mental health support, especially in this space.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If there's anybody watching this or who is watching after the live, what advice would you give to somebody who's supporting a loved one going through infertility? Because it can be so tricky to know how to help our family members without crossing boundaries. I know it's something I struggled with on my journey. I think it's something we hear in support group from our support group members over and over and over. Like, my sister-in-law or my whatever, like people saying the wrong thing. So I would love to
Mhm.
hear what you would say and what advice you would give to friends or family who are supporting those who are going through the infertility journey without being too intrusive or overwhelming.
Yeah, I think keep checking in. I think that's the bottom line. Keep checking in. And, I hear not wanting to say the wrong thing. And I think don't make assumptions, right? Don't assume that the person is feeling one way. Don't assume that they do want support. Don't assume that they don't want support, right? Because oftentimes we just want to be asked, right? We want to be sought out. We want to be thought of, right? And a simple check-in of, hey, I was thinking of you. How are you doing? Right? It doesn't have to say about the fertility. It doesn't have to say anything triggering or not triggering. It's just a simple, hey, I was thinking of you. And leaving it there, right? Then the person has the option of saying thank you or of saying, yeah, actually, I really, really need to talk to you right now. Can we talk? Right? The option is there for them, but what they want from you is just the approach, right? It's just knowing that they have a support system that is available to them if and when they need them, right? I think that's the most important piece, just knowing that you're loved, right? And that you're taken care of. I think that's what we all want.
Yeah, and maybe you could speak a little bit too to boundaries for the fertility patient or the couple who's going through the journey. Can you just give a whole lot of permission for everybody to just
Mhm.
back out of everything, please? Professional permission to just not go to the
Yeah.
things that they don't feel like they can do. Yeah, I would love to hear
Yeah,
if
I
you
hear
have any
you.
advice for that too.
Yeah, there's too many questions, right? When are you having that second child? When are you having that third child? Is
Yeah.
what's going on? Why is this not happening? And it's inappropriate. It really is, especially in a room full of people at Christmas or whatever the situation is. That's not what the people need, right?
No.
And in terms of one-on-one, I think that is something that, you know, you have to mitigate with every relationship, right? I know that's for some people, their parents are too consuming, not enough available, right? And, I think again, the compassion piece, right? That nobody has a manual, unfortunately. Nobody
Mhm.
knows how to do this 100% right. We're all human. We all make mistakes at one point in the other or another, right? Like I've made mistakes with my own family and friends too, I'm sure, right? We're not perfect, but at the same time, communication goes a long way, right? So
Mhm.
stating your boundaries, right? If someone asks you and you don't want to answer, it is totally fair not to answer, right? Say, thank you so much for your concern, but actually, I really don't want to talk about that right now.
Yeah. That's the permission I was
Very
looking
simple
for.
and straightforward. Yep.
Yes.
And then,
All the
then you're free
permission.
to choose. Are we talking about something else completely opposite and I'm still getting the support from you in a different way? Or am I going to distance myself from you for a while?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's up to you and it's to navigate with every person. But I hear it, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Mm.
All right. I think that the hardest part is that there's a lot of like shame around it, kind of like you mentioned. And I think
Hmm.
that it's you kind of even when you set those boundaries, I think that people are just so invested sometimes, and you're like, they don't know, they can't take no for an answer, I think is sometimes the hard
Hmm.
part, right? And you're like, or they're always just like waiting, like, is this going to be the time you're going to tell me something? Or like you don't have a drink one time because
Hmm.
you're doing a treatment cycle, and then they're like, you're pregnant, and you're like, nope, not pregnant, just doing a cycle. Or like then when you are pregnant and you're trying to keep it a
Hmm.
secret, and you're like, don't want anyone to know yet because it's so early, and then they're like, you're pregnant, you're pregnant, and you're like, no, just like, you know I think
Hmm.
that's the hard part for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really hard to navigate it, right? And that's why there's no one size fits all because you're going to interact differently with everyone, right? If it's your own mother asking, like, presume, you have enough free form to be able to say to your mom, like, I love you, but please,
Mhm.
right, in a really nice way. But if it's a colleague or if it's an acquaintanceship, right? Like everyone is different and there's different ways of going about it. And just, I think for yourself, the most important piece is just trying to remember that they are well-meaning, right? They do try to mean well. They're not getting it right, and we get that, right? And to hold on to yourself, right? To know that you
Mhm.
have your key people who you trust, that you want to be talking about this with, and that the other people just don't matter. They really don't at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. I think that's like what you really have to do is find your like group of people. So whether it's like the support
Hmm.
groups, or whether it's just your therapist that you're speaking to, or whether, your partner, that's really who you should be communicating with. But I know even for myself during times that and Aaron probably was like that too, where you're going through treatments and you're just like you don't get it. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's not their body. It's not um, them experiencing, not that they're not experiencing it in a different way, but I feel like that can be really challenging too.
100%. And that's why I think we need to do better in terms of educating the public,
Mm-hmm.
right? In terms of doing more of these talks, talking to more people, getting the word out there as to what we're really experiencing, right? So
Yeah.
again, so that we don't feel so alone and don't feel so much shame, because then people will be hopefully more sensitive to it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you
We're
find that you're getting that it's one-sided, like one couple, like, or the person who has the struggle is the one who it's their body that is not cooperating with? Is it usually like one-sided, or do you feel like they're both just facing infertility in different I don't know if I'm saying this correctly or but making
Mhm.
sense, but do you feel like it's like do you feel like it's mostly the woman if they've experienced like they're the ones who experience the losses, or do you feel like it's more so the man because he just isn't understanding, or like how do you, I don't know, just curious how.
You know what? Everyone is different, right? So again, I don't want to speak too generally because it's just not fair, right? Because everyone has such a different experience. Um, I think that again, everyone experiences it in their own way, right? And we often are overlooking the partner, right? I want to say that in terms of because we all agree that the person whose body it is, that they're going through something huge. The problem is we often sidestep the partner, or we are oblivious to the partner, or we're not understanding that the partner is also going through things, or that it's hidden so deep that they're not even understanding what they're experiencing too, right? Which is exactly why I like to do this journey with the couple in terms of bringing it all to the light, right? And giving care for both of them in this
Yeah.
space, right? To make sure that both of them are getting support for each other themselves, but that they're also reciprocating the support
Yeah.
for each other and that they're creating a stronger bond, right?
Yeah, for sure. Before we go into our final segment, we do have a question from
Mhm.
Instagram. And it is, what are your top 5 tips for couples going through a journey? I know you've touched on a lot of things. Can you summarize what are the top 5 things?
Yeah. Okay. Top 5 things.
Give us the top 2.
Um, yeah, top two, I think, is really keeping your connection alive, keeping your intimacy alive. I think that is really, the most important piece in terms of, like I said, it doesn't have to be sexual. It's about emotional intimacy and it's about physical touch if you can, right? And if you can't, that's okay as long as you're talking about it, right? As long as you're acknowledging it and it's not the elephant in the room or it's not sidestepped, right? Or it's not hidden with anger or resentment, right? Because that's when resentment builds, is when we're not talking and reaching each other, right? So, yes, definitely keeping the connection and keeping the intimacy alive 1,000%, right? Try to do those things that you did when you were dating, when you still liked each other. I know that's hard to
Yes,
say, but when you were starting to like each other, right? And build on that. Try to as much
totally.
as you can, right? And
Yeah.
take breaks. Breaks are really important. Take those vacations while you still can. Um, take a break in terms of a distraction, have a project together. So those are 2 tips.
That's
Uh,
great. 2 tips is
three,
great.
three, go to therapy if you need it.
Go to
There we
therapy.
go.
Absolutely.
Go
No,
go
that's
get your
so
car
good.
serviced. Right.
Yes.
Well,
Oh
this has
man.
been such an insightful and meaningful conversation, Dr. Arielle. And before we wrap up, is there any final message or words of encouragement that you'd like to share with our listeners who are navigating their own fertility journeys?
Keep up the hope. It will happen. It will happen. It might not be in the format you thought it would look like, but it will happen.
Yeah, that's so good. That's great
Yeah. And
advice.
happy
Hang in there,
Valentine's Day.
everybody. Happy
Yeah,
Valentine's Day.
keep
Celebrate
it
you.
sexy and keep it
Yes.
keep it
It's like
intimacy,
it's the
connection.
one holiday when we're going through infertility that's like not family focused on like kids or
Hmm.
relationships or moms or dads. It's like this is actually the one that you can like just do it up, enjoy each other. This is about you, for sure. Um,
And do it before the kids come. Just,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Absolutely.
yeah.
So good. Thank you so much for being here. You have so much knowledge, so much expertise, and we are so grateful for you in our community. I'm saying it again. I said it at the start. Go to the Oasis Fertility podcast. Check out Arielle's episode. It's called Arielle's Story on the Oasis Fertility podcast, everywhere you get your podcasts. This episode will be up on anywhere you get your podcast in a couple days. So keep checking back there for this if you want to listen, or if you only caught half of the live and you want to tune in. You'll also be able to find it on YouTube, on our Facebook page, and hopefully on Instagram too. The live will be living there, so you can tune in and watch it later. Thanks so much. And why don't you tell us, where can our listeners find you? They want to connect with you. So please
Yeah,
tell us about that.
100%. So, I mean, first of all, you can follow me on socials. So I do have Instagram and I do have Facebook and LinkedIn. And you can book a free 15-minute consult online. So if you go to my website, you'll be able to book directly with me. I'm still accepting clients. And then I do have some like fun, exciting news is that I'm actually going to be opening a clinic soon. So there will
Woohoo!
be more on that soon. So keep your ears perked and stay tuned because there will be a new website coming and
So
new services
exciting.
as well. Yeah,
And you are
I'm
licensed in
excited.
Ontario and Quebec. Did you say that?
I am licensed in
Yeah.
Ontario and Quebec. Yes, and this clinic is going to be servicing Ontario and Quebec. So keep your
Okay.
ears perked.
Very,
Yeah,
very exciting.
Perfect. Well, thank
yeah.
you again for such an important conversation. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in today. And if you found this conversation helpful, please share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. And thank you guys.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you,
so much for
everybody.
having me.
Yeah, make sure you can find us on Instagram. If you're viewing over on Facebook or anywhere, we're always at Oasis FSN. Or if you're not following our Fertility Village live Instagram page, it's fertility__village on Instagram. So definitely go check those out. Go like us, follow, subscribe. I don't have any buttons for anything, but I'm going to do this because this is what the people do on the live thing. So go do the things. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and supporting us. We are so grateful for all of you. Don't forget, wherever you are today on your journey, you are not alone. Welcome to the village. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining. Have a good night.